All right, everybody, let's get this show on the road. Welcome, welcome. Thursday morning, second session. Everybody is awake, hopefully properly caffeinated, happy and healthy. How's Ignite so far? Good? Learning a lot? Now that's what I like to hear. We're going to get some passion up in here. It's code. We're all geeks. We're all nerds, whatever you self-identify as, but passion's important when we're talking about things that really enable us for success. So welcome to the Power of the Shell, Advanced Administration of Office 365 with Windows PowerShell. A little bit about me. My name's Wes Blaylock. I am a Premier Field Engineer, which is in the customer support arm of Microsoft. So I work with customers that have purchased a Premier support contract. I specialize in all flavors of Exchange on-premises, Exchange Online, Office 365, starting to spread my wings a little bit into some other workloads or technologies in Office 365. And then I do some work with PowerShell and helping customers with automation of tasks, advanced administration of the things that they're running. So as you all know, PowerShell is becoming so important to all of our technologies at Microsoft. It really is our way that you can take anything that you want to do and affect change in those technologies. There are some basic administration capabilities that ship with almost any product on premises or online, but those are basic. Anything that is up there is really in PowerShell before it's ever up in either the administrative console, the portal, or whatever the appropriate administration GUI is for your technology. So being able to harness that power of PowerShell is becoming so important for us to be successful in our day-to-day jobs. The good news is that once you learn some tips and tricks surrounding PowerShell, applying them from one technology that you understand very well to either a new technology you're getting into or a technology that you haven't managed before becomes exceedingly easy. Because guess what? Bing, Google, Dogpile, Ask Jeeves, any of those search engines can find you some PowerShell examples out on the internet, and it's just knowing how to take those examples and put them in the context of what you want to achieve. So today, what we're going to talk about a lot is PowerShell, tips and tricks for PowerShell, and it's really going to be in the context of 365. So I've got a couple of things that are going to show you specifically, here's an operation you probably want to perform in Office 365, and here's how to do it. So mostly Office 365 with PowerShell as a mechanism. But at the end of the session, you may look back and say, oh wow, we really talked a lot about PowerShell and less about, hey, here's exactly all the tips and tricks for 365 specifically. So this really is a launching pad. And what you may notice is some of the examples in this are going to be more centered around identity management and Exchange workloads, because generally that's the common ground that everybody can take and bolster off of, go into other technologies. I had a conversation just before with a gentleman in the front row running SharePoint, and he was asking me, hey, are we going to get into this advanced SharePoint stuff? And the answer to that is actually, on that specific question, no, but the lessons that you learn here, you're going to be able to take, apply to what you find on the internet for SharePoint, Skype for Business Administration, new workloads that don't exist today. So I wanted to give you that lesson in PowerShell and how to fish and how to take what you want to achieve, bring your knowledge of the tool set, and apply it going forward, rather than just give you a bunch of scripts up on the screen that are pertinent today, may not be pertinent tomorrow. So I want to set the context for that. One, so that everybody makes sure that they're in the right session, and I won't take any offense if you say that's not for me, I'm walking out. Don't, I hope not, because there is something for everybody in this session. And then, the other one is make sure that, the reviews come in okay, because we always like success. We always like happy customers. So I want to make sure you're not wasting your time in a session that doesn't apply to you. So I want to know a little bit more about the crowd, because that's really important as we talk about context and as we dive in. So how many people here would identify as an IT professional? Good. Vast majority audience. Kind of what I expected. Anybody who also plays in the IT management space? Good. A little percentage in there. All right. How many people in here have deployed Office 365? Already deployed. Good. Vast majority. How many people have not and are trying to understand what's coming down the road for them? Good. Good show of hands, good. There's going to be stuff that applies to you all as well here, and you're going to get a jump on a couple of things that those of us that have come down the road from the beginning of the path have struggled with over time, and you're going to be able to take that lesson, bolster yourself forward, and not have to waste a couple hours, a couple minutes down the road. Let's see. Who here is predominantly a messaging or exchange admin? Okay, so actually smaller than I would have expected. The vast majority of my experience is with Exchange, and then identity before that. So you'll see some of this Exchange stuff going on. Based on the majority of the room being non-Exchange, I won't get into basically drilling down and seeing what people are running on premises. I usually go down and make sure people aren't still running Exchange 2003. And then the real trick is seeing who will actually admit it. Usually there's one or two in the room. So let's dive in and let's talk. Oh, I have one more question. Who here also attended Lawrence Chu's session on Office 365 administration earlier in the week? Okay, good. A couple people, you hopefully heard about the session from that, about what we're going to be doing. Who here went to Scott Schnall's tips and tricks on 365 administration? Good. Good little bit of the room. Those are great sessions. If you didn't catch those, I would strongly recommend going back and reviewing those later on. Two fantastic sessions, both with some pretty unique content. And specifically in Lawrence's session, one of the things that really got me excited is to go home and tell my customer about the advanced reporting capabilities coming in Office 365 and the integration into Power BI in a nice, safe manner that gets me what I want, that I can then say, hey, this is pretty cool technology. I'm going to go play with this because Power BI is just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So let's continue forward and let's talk about the ways that we can administer Office 365 workloads, which are also called technologies. If anybody isn't familiar with the term workload, you're going to hear technology and workload interchangeably from a lot of Microsoft people. So the most basic one that we've got is the Office 365 Admin Center, right? You sign up for a tenant, you get a website where you can go and administer Office 365. The basic Admin Center actually gives you some entry points into each individual technology or workload that you can do right from that. You can manage some of the centralized components of Office 365, your licenses, your subscriptions, some of the customization of themes if you want to get down into that. And then it actually lets you go into the workload management for each individual technology. So for Exchange, you're going to be able to open up the Exchange Administration Center from there. There were some operations that you can do in both places, but the EAC certainly being the more powerful of the tool. Likewise, SharePoint, Link, and so on and so forth. So it's a great place to start. However, this crowd is a crowd that's interested in more. And before we jump into the more, actually I forgot this one was in here, the Office 365 Admin app. Who here has not installed the Admin app on their phone? Be honest, seriously. Okay, enough of the room that I'll say, go install the Admin app. Because you know what? It's basic. You can access some incident management things, understand what's going on, but there are times now and in the future where it's going to save you, like when you're out at dinner with your spouse and you get the call, hey, the new exec isn't licensed and is getting errors, and you can pull out your phone and assign a license right from your phone and get back to dinner with your spouse. Because I know we got a mix of guys and girls in the room, but I go by the mantra, happy wife, happy life. And so, amen to that. So, it really does let you take what you need and puts it in the power of your hands. Hey, is there a service incident right now? Okay, let me just pull it open, see what's going on. Toast notifications coming from that application so you can say, hey, I care about service incidents. I want to get ahead of it, even if it's a false positive ultimately. I want to have power and information in my hands. So great utility, absolutely download it and keep it up to date. It's not just a little we have an app too kind of a thing that everybody seems to be going with these days. All right. So now we want to get into the actual power and what we can do to perform some advanced administration And that's really going to be PowerShell for Office 365, which is the vast majority of the content in this session. So we're going to talk a lot about that, but also wanted to highlight some things that are coming down the pike, which are these Office 365 management APIs, which are really going to allow you, from a development standpoint, to manage the services that you deploy for your customers and users, depending on if you're a hoster or if you're a direct IT shop. So, like I said, we're really all into PowerShell for Office 365 this session. So let's continue on. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there are some basic things that you can understand that make you feel completely and totally empowered when you open that window, that takes away the fear and makes you feel comfortable. You're on a journey. You don't know how to get to the end point. You know what you want to do, but it's okay because you've got tools in your belt. So I had one customer tell me when I said, hey, okay, we need to go into PowerShell to do this. And they said, oh, no, don't make me go to the dark side. So I said, come on, this is really where your power is. This is really where you can be more intelligent about your administration. You're not confined to individual radio and checked boxes. You aren't confined to what buttons have been created. You really can say, I have the capacity to do something. I want to affect this change, and I'm going to go freaking do it. So I want everybody to be able to embrace that, and that's where we're going to start with a couple of things that are going to let you go in seemingly blind and understand what's available to you as you continue on. So talking about what is PowerShell, I think this is probably just a really basic overview for everybody. It is our command line shell and scripting language for administering Microsoft technologies. One of the big things from a terminology perspective, which I'm a big fan of appropriate terminology, that's on the screen is PowerShell commands are called commandlets. So when you issue an individual command, you'll also hear that interchangeably be called a commandlet. A set of commandlets forms a script. So when we hear script, we think of this big, long, 1,000 line of code thing. No, it doesn't have to be. A script can be a repeatable PowerShell execution of one line of code that you need that's long enough that you don't want to have to type it out every time. That can be a script too. So recognize that just taking individual operations or a set of operations that achieve a purpose and putting it together in a file and executing it, that's your script. So every script starts with one line. So recognize that and feel free to write your one-liner and say, I created a script, and then go and make it better. All right. So we got a command line interface. Obviously, it ships in most versions. I think all supported versions of Windows now. But you have the ability to upgrade that if you've got an older version, PowerShell 3, PowerShell 4. As we continue on in time, you're going to see things go on and upward. So when we think about why PowerShell for Office 365, we've kind of talked about it a little bit so far. But we've got the Office 365 Admin Center in the top. Great functionality, great basic intro for how to perform some basic tasks. However, sometimes we need to do either advanced tasks, like we've kind of talked about, but sometimes we need to do basic tasks a significant number of times for a significant number of users, endpoints, objects, whatever. And so that's really one of the places where PowerShell is going to give us a lot of agility to be able to perform individual operations multiple times over. Sometimes we need to filter data. Sometimes I need to run a custom report. I know the attributes that I want, but I don't have the ability to create that report today in Office 365 Admin Center. Cool, let's create the report from PowerShell. You know the data you need, you know it's available to you, let's go after it. Being able to export data kind of comes in the same form with filtering data, then being able to take that data, export it into another usable format, whether that is another input file for something else, whether it's a report for a boss that says, hey, how many licenses have we consumed, whether that's whatever. And then obviously the advanced functionality. So let's start with the simplest command there is. In the Exchange world, I say there are 3 commands from which you can get to anything you need to and want to. But generically, I'll tell you there are 2 commands that everyone absolutely must know. And if you feel like you're too advanced to use these commands, then you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because this is where you start, and this is where you can always reground when you find yourself in unfamiliar situations. Get-command. That shows me everything I have at my disposal in my current instantiation of PowerShell. right? So when you open up PowerShell, you've already got a large number of commands that are available to you. As I add in additional modules, which we'll talk about here in a minute, specific to 365, I get new commands. Maybe I need to see, hey, I wonder if there's a way to do X, Y, or Z, but I don't know the PowerShell for it, and I don't want to go Bing or Google it. So let me just go figure out what I have at my disposal right now. So get-command, boom. Oh, there it is. That sounds like what I want to do. But now how do I use it? This is the other one, and this is the one that when people tell me they don't like to ask for help, I say, come on. Everybody needs help. It's impossible to know everything in today's modern IT world. It's impossible to know everything about individual technologies. I've worked for Microsoft for 4 years, and I will tell you that I am continually humbled by how little I know about the technologies that I'm considered an expert in. We all have to work together to get the information, and we have to know where our resources are. So get-help, also alias for it is just help space whatever command that you want to run, and it pulls back the free manual for the command that you want to run, and we all know what they say about read the free manual, right? We tell our users this, we should do it too. So it shows you individual parameters like you can see on screen, and I know that's really small. We'll get into some larger font when we get into the demo portion. And then at the bottom, there are things that you can do additionally. Hey, give me some examples of how this might be used. Give me a detailed list because I really care about the data types for the individual parameters, and I need to make sure the data that I'm passing you is valid. And give me the full. I care about everything. I want to see which parameters are required, which parameters are optional, and the additional information. So you really can dig into the most simple of commands in a very advanced way if you start playing around with get-help. So between those two commands, you've now been empowered for anything at your disposal. And I really do hope that you use those a lot more often because I find myself saying, man, I'm really struggling with this, and realizing I just need to ask for help. And guys, sometimes we need to ask for help. We need to ask for directions. You can do this in the privacy of your own PowerShell session, so nobody has to know. One of the things that comes up often is, I know I have the ability to do this, but I don't see it here. What gives? Why don't I have this commandlet that I know that I have permissions to perform based on my role within my organization or company, but I don't see it? So one of the things to think about, there are commandlets that only come in when you've loaded appropriate modules. So sometimes you need to make sure, oh, I've got the MS Online module loaded. That's why, or unloaded, and I need to load it. That's why I don't have get-msol user or get-msol account SKU. And then one of the other things is, do you have the correct role-based access control permissions? This example comes up a lot in terms of Exchange, where people say, hey, I'm an org admin. I should have the keys to the kingdom except for access to the servers. Why don't I have XYZ? Why don't I have the ability to do a mailbox search and export? Why don't I have the ability to create an address list? What you'll find is that just because you're an org admin in Exchange specifically, but you can take this out to other workloads, doesn't mean you actually have access to everything, but you may be able to grant yourself access to everything. The example that I alluded to at the first was, why don't I have the ability to search and export mailbox content? Well, org admins don't have that, but org admins can add themselves or other people into discovery management RBAC access role, which then loads those commandlets in. We want to protect your user data, push it off to the side, and only grant people the ability to access it specifically when they actually have that need. So think about those two things when you know that you should be able to do something but you can't find it. And the RBAC one is actually one that kind of dovetails off into something we were talking about earlier in the front row as well, which is, hey, I need to be able to give people access to PowerShell, but I don't want to give them access to everything, right? I need to give them access to specific commandlets, or maybe even specific parameters of commandlets. And you can do that with RBAC. You can create custom RBAC roles and say, hey, you know what? Tier 1 help desk, I want to give them the ability to set display name, because maybe they need to change display name to something based on changes in personnel. Maybe we put department in display name, I don't know. But I want to be able to give them the access to that, but I don't want them to be able to set mailbox quotas. I don't want them to be able to change email address policies. So what I would do is create an RBAC policy, set-mailbox, and the specific parameter for display name, grant them that access, and now they have specific access to commandlet or commandlets and specific parameters. The others just simply don't exist to them when PowerShell loads. So they have the ability to still get help. They can still go out and do what they need to do, and they can perform the tasks that are assigned to them, but they don't have elevated access to the point where they would be able to go and do harm to users because of ignorance or maliciousness, or to have access to things where they can just start poking around, asking too many questions, or causing any other kind of impact. So, yes, sir. Gotcha. Yeah, and so one of the questions is in advanced versions of PowerShell, you're able to do some more advanced things surrounding these parameters and these commandlets. And I don't have information on what's coming next or versioning and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about what's existent today, but pay attention towards that. All right. One of the biggest tricks that I can give you is going to seem like one of the dumbest things that I can tell you. But I will tell you that, oh my goodness, people do not cover their tracks, and people do not give themselves the ability to say, I screwed up, but I can fix it. So one of the biggest things I want absolutely everybody in here to do from now on is whenever you're going to run a commandlet that affects change, set, update, whatever, I want you to do a get, set, get. So first, get. I want you to know what the data looked like before you affected change on the object, right? Even if it's just in the context of your PowerShell window so that you can go back. Sometimes people will save these off to files, right? But you need to know what the data was before so that if the change you make doesn't end up going through appropriately, or if the change you made you thought was for good and was actually not and it broke something, I need to be able to go back. So always get first, then set, make your change. And one of the things you'll notice about a ton of sets is that it doesn't show you, hey, here's what it was before, here's what I updated it to afterwards, just so you can know that you made the change you intended to make, which is why after we do our set or whatever commandlet affects change on an object, we want to go ahead and get again. Make sure that it actually worked, right? Especially when we're talking about remote PowerShell up to Office 365 or to other servers. Sometimes there's loss of communication. Sometimes something gets garbled. So we need to be sure that ultimately what we intended to do was done, that it looks good, and then have the ability to go back. So get, set, get for the win. Absolutely, every time. All right, a few tips and tricks. So these are kind of some of my lessons learned and things that I've noticed when working with a bunch of different customers. All right. Tab complete to make sure you spelled correctly. PowerShell, God, I love it. But man, do we have some long pieces of terminology. So one of the things is make sure that you're actually running the appropriate commandlet, that you don't have big fat sausage fingers like mine and type something incorrectly. Two is, guess what? It's going to save you time. So when I go and do a get-msol user, I never type the full thing. Get-msolu tab. When I see the camel case, I know that it's the appropriate commandlet, and then I save myself 3 characters there, but you all can think about a commandlet you run on a decently regular basis that is very, very long, or a parameter that's very, very long that you'll save yourself from. So tab complete for commandlets as well as for parameters of commandlets, and you'll really save yourself a lot of time, and you'll prevent yourself from a lot of errors on screen that you have to figure out, oh, I used an M instead of an N in one of my commandlets. This is one that some people know about, but a lot don't. It goes along with the fact that we've got a lot of very lengthy commandlets in PowerShell. So people, I see left arrow, 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 left arrow. Come back 5 minutes later, they're back to the point they want to be in their commandlet because they needed to change one thing, whether they're doing operations 3 times for 3 different users, whatever. If you hold down the control key and hit the left or right arrow, it will take your cursor to the previous or following white space. So it really is a way that you can save yourself a lot of time, move quickly through, and get what you need to get done done faster and on to the next thing, because we all have so many tasks in our day. So absolutely use this one, share this one, because as soon as people see it, it changes your world. And then you realize it's been there all along in Windows and in Command Prompt, and you can use it all over, and suddenly you're just all over the place. All right. Forgot a parameter? Stay calm and FL on. So if you forget what a parameter is called, whether the words are backwards and forwards or forwards and backwards, that's okay. You can take any commandlet, pipe it to an FL, and get anything that you need to. Hey, I need to change something about a user object, but I forget what the quota is called in PowerShell. Okay, do a get the name, then do your set. No big deal, but one of the things people are fretful of with PowerShell is, I don't know what I don't know, right? So get command, get help, FL on anything, I can see everything that's available to me. All right, this last one, I'm thinking of an individual in particular at my current customer whom I love, but he always comes by my desk and says, man, you got a lot of red on your screen. Your PowerShell's bleeding. And I say, no. It's okay to make mistakes, but don't CLS and clear the screen as soon as you've got red, because you don't want people to think that you're infallible. Red is good. Red tells you context for what went wrong, not just that something did go wrong. So leave that red up there, be proud, learn as you go, and then take that lesson and go forward in time. So remember, red is good. It's okay to make mistakes. It's when you don't get red and you didn't know what you were doing because you didn't use get help and you made changes you didn't intend to. That's the badness. So don't do that. All right. So let's move on along and go into some PowerShell basics. So what I want to do is just show a couple of these things. And I saw a lot of nods around the room, so I'm guessing that a lot of this is we're pretty used to this, but I just want to show everybody a couple of these things so that I can go. Everybody, I think I checked earlier, but everybody in the back corner can still see that okay? Text is all right? Good. Very, very good. So let's see. Get-command. Let's just see what I've got available to me. Boom. I mean, and you can see it is streaming by. So I've got a ton of stuff already loaded. That can be daunting sometimes. So one of the things you can do is say, all right, well, that was really fast. I couldn't catch all that. So I want to do a get-command, and I want to pipe it to more. What this will do is it'll put one screen at a time up in front of me so I can understand what's going on. Hit the space bar, brings me down to the next. Cool little trick if you've got a bunch of data and you need to be able to see it all. The other trick that I'll go ahead and show you is if you go up to Properties in your PowerShell window, set your buffer size high, especially when you're running long-running things that you want to be able to scroll back up to. We all love those scripts that do stuff on screen and they keep flying by, make us look cool like we're in the Matrix. But then you need to be able to go back and reference that stuff. And when your screen rolls after 50 lines and you can't go back and understand what went wrong, you look a little silly. So set that high, and then for anything that is really long-running, make sure you got output so that you can go back and get that. And I see a hand up back there. Is it a question about a specific piece of content? Thank you very much for letting me know. For those that are watching live, the question was that the people on the far side of the room couldn't see the very bottom line, so they want to be able to see which command I'm typing. So thank you for saying that, and I will do my best to remember. Give it a good college try. So get-command. So let's do a get-help on something that is, let's do a get-help on get-command. Let's get a manual about our most useful utility. So I've mentioned that there's aliases. So what I'm going to do is instead of typing get-help, I'm just going to type help. Help for get-command. This shows me what I can do with this. Not a lot to show here because guess what? It's just get-command. You can take this, and this is one of those lessons I want you to carry forward as far as this goes. And then I will show you one more, which is get-alias more. So what we've got on screen here is all of the short versions that exist for commands that are currently loaded. So what we can see is that CLS that we're also used to typing is actually a shortened version of clear-host. So we all knew the short version of that one, but maybe we didn't know the short version of for each object, which is the %sign. So when I'm doing a for each on data that I've come back and used and want to do something else with, I can just type a %sign instead of for each -object. So use this, go see what aliases are out there. This is a great way to play the one-liner game, where you walk up to a coworker and say, tell me what this one line of code does. As you use these aliases, they're actually a little bit more confused than just, oh, wait, well, it's written in plain English because Microsoft's awesome and we want you to know what you're running. Take that, move it to the aliases, trick somebody, say, no, this is what it does. Come up with the best one-liner. I've heard, I was on the showroom floor yesterday and somebody was telling me how they like to do the one-liner competition at work. Hey, what's this do? So let's see. Clear again, and what I'll do is git-command, git-help, tab that, so I know that it's right. Git-comm, tab for tab complete. It's going to show me what's next. If I type something that's small that matches multiple commands, I could keep tabbing and it'll continue on. Shift-tab will go back. Just a note, as soon as you type one more character in it, you've changed from your original filter to a new filter. So tab, shift tab, if it's not going into what you thought it was, did you type something else? Did you kill that current filter? So, and then the last thing I'll show you is instead of left, right, individually, if I hold down the control key, hit left, jumps back to the previous white space. You can take that and extrapolate. Hopefully that saves you some time and effort. Slow clap for the win. I'm not even done yet. All right. Man, I'm loving this crowd. Y'all are easy. I didn't have to give you beer. All right. So let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. So those are some PowerShell basics that you can use that will really help anything you do. That is not specific to Office 365. And you'll be able to take some of the things even that are later and take them and say, oh, wait, I can use this when I'm managing Exchange Online, when I'm managing Azure, when I'm managing anything else that has access to PowerShell. All right, so we're going to go through and show a little bit about how to get connected to Office 365 with PowerShell, because it's a little bit of a mystery sometimes for some people. And what we tend to think about is, okay, I've got PowerShell. There's a cloud, big fluffy cloud with a big old boxy orange up there. And I just need to connect, right? Cool, I'm connected to Office 365. And realistically speaking, when we think about this, what we're really connecting to is Azure AD. That's the first thing you're going to find on any of the connections to Office 365 is the ability to connect to Azure AD, manage my users. What people will often forget about is I've got individual workloads running in the cloud or technologies running in the cloud. So I've got Exchange running in the cloud. I need to be able to connect individually and separately to Exchange in the cloud. I've got Skype for Business in the cloud. I need to be able to connect to Skype for Business in the cloud. I've got SharePoint in the cloud. I need to be able to connect there. And each of those individual blue arrows represents a separate connection to Office 365, and they have different requirements for what you need to do and how you're going to connect to them. So let's talk about each individual one. So the first one is connecting to Azure Active Directory, which is our directory structure in Office 365 that you're going to use to manage your users. Whether or not you have provisioned users directly into Office 365 by just clicking the plus sign and adding user, or whether you're using something like directory synchronization to take your users that exist on premises, sync them to the cloud, and use the services up there. When you do that latter thing and you synchronize your users from on-premises, one of the big things to remember is, okay, my users now actually have 2 user accounts. I've got Active Directory running in the cloud, which is an extension of my on-premises Active Directory. They are 2 separate user accounts that very often are made to look like one, but just think about it. It's Active Directory running in the cloud. It's Exchange running in the cloud. There's no big, huge magic, right? There's some glue that we use to tie them all together, and we put some spackle on there, and we hide some ugly edges and borders. But realistically speaking, if you start thinking about how you would run the technologies, how we are probably running the technologies, and the fact that they are the same thing in the cloud, that fretful nature and that scary borderline starts to diminish, and you start feeling more in control. It also lets you take scripts and lessons and things that you find on the internet that are for on-premises technologies. Try them out in the cloud. Sometimes you need some modification, but you can almost always take the things that are done there, apply them to the cloud. So, well, connecting to Azure Active Directory, this is the one that most people have done. You need Windows PowerShell 3, you need .NET, and then you need two additional things. One is the Microsoft Online Services Sign-In Assistant, and I've got shortcuts in the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint will obviously be made available after this, that I've made for each of the downloadables that we reference, and they're all in appropriate PowerShell format. So git-moss SIA, and then Microsoft Azure Active Directory module for Windows PowerShell. So that one is the one that really is going to let you do things against those users in Azure Active Directory. You heard me talking about git msol user. We're going to see a lot more of that as we continue on in time. So when you have that, you need to load it. It is not automatically loaded into PowerShell. You get a separate shortcut that you can run, but what you'll often find is that you just want to start up generic PowerShell and be able to use these features in that. So that would be the B in the how to connect, which is just import-module-ms online. And then you're going to connect to the service, which is just the connect-msl service. It'll prompt you for credentials, and then you'll go on from there. Why doesn't the module auto-load? So when you run PowerShell, you're actually running one executable with a set of confines. You could actually have it automatically load by changing some environment variables, but most find that because of the nature of the fact that we span different computers all the time, that they don't want to make that change. It is in a PS module path, but it's not automatically loaded as soon as you open any PowerShell. The question for those who may be listening live was, is it not a module in the module path? So it doesn't automatically load when you run any PowerShell. So the import module MS Online is what you need to import it into your current PowerShell session, and then that's going to give you the commandlets like the connect MSOL service. Yep, and you can customize your profile, and that's, you can get into doing some custom things and making it, but we're going to talk about vanilla out-of-the-box default so that we make sure that nobody's left behind on some of this. So you'll see me doing some things that may seem a little clunky, but it's just to make sure that anybody who starts from ground zero is able to make sure that they get access to this. So we're going to quickly go through the next couple so we can get into the fun part, which is the actual PowerShell stuff. Connecting to Exchange Online, this is the one that I'm very proud of my team for. I'm in support, so it's not really my team, but I'm going to claim it anyway. That is probably the easiest to load because you don't actually have to import any modules. It uses full remote PowerShell, and when you connect to Exchange Online, it's going to pull down all of the commandlets that are available to you based on RBAC configuration and make those available to you in your local PowerShell session. So, got the content on that. There's also articles on almost all of them. And again, the slides will be up later, so you can use these and figure out how to go forward from there. So when we're thinking about Link Online, Skype for Business, we're going to need PowerShell, .NET, and the Link Online connector module, same premise as Active Directory that we talked about earlier, but different module. You'll import the module, take a credential, pass the credential, import the session. So something that you see here that we haven't really talked about yet is ABCD, right? We're importing a module, so we're getting PowerShell commandlets available to us. We get a credential, store it in there. That's cool. We need to be able to store it as a secure string. Fine, well and good, pops up a dialog box. Now I've got my credential stored. Then we're creating this thing called session. Whenever we see $ characters equal, we're creating a variable. That variable is live for the life of the PowerShell session or until we run clear-variable and clean that variable up. And what that does is it lets us take individual objects that we want to do more work with that we can't do inline, or that we want to be able to reference multiple times over, and then we can take those and use them later, just like we see in C, which is, okay, now I'm going to create a new session object, a variable, and I'm going to run new CS online session, pass it the credential object I had before, and then import the session. Importing the session actually takes and makes my live session in PowerShell fleshed out to the full feature set of the session that I created. All right, SharePoint Online, you got PowerShell, you got a SharePoint Online management shell, and that's another module. It is a module, and that's where you're going to do 1B if you didn't click on the SharePoint Online Management Shell specifically, which already does 1B, does that auto loading for you. And then get credential, you're going to connect into the SharePoint Online service. This is one that you do need to know an additional piece of information separate from just who am I. Everything else loads based on the fact that you've got one endpoint for your service based on your user credential. So I can get where I need to connect you to and give you access to based on who you are, who you tell me you are. This, you also need to pass in the URL of the administration site for your SharePoint farm. But as you're going into SharePoint administration, that's going to be well and good. You're going to know right where that's at. But that is one difference I want to call out. So if I wanted to connect to all services, and I'm going to take some questions later on, because I want to make sure to get through the content. So please do ask your question. If you have questions about something that you can't see, definitely flag me down. I want to make sure everybody gets good information while you're here. But as far as content-based questions, let's hold those till the end. All right, so if I wanted to connect to all services, I would do something like this. And what I'm doing here is I am importing the module for MS Online, because I started up just generic PowerShell. I didn't start up Windows Azure Active Directory PowerShell. I am, one line that's not in here is the credential, the $ credential. Obviously, I've already loaded a variable with my credential, and I'm just using that on forward. So connect to MSOL service to connect to Azure Active Directory. I'm going to import the module for SharePoint Online. Then I'm going to connect to my SharePoint Online service, import the module for Link Online, connect to my Link Online service, import that, and then create my Exchange session, connect to that, import that. Now I've got all of the commandlets for local, Azure Active Directory, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and then Skype for Business Online. So I can really manage everything all up. And what you'll find is that most of you will probably make a file that you run. I've got one on my auto load in my profile. Whenever I pull up PowerShell, it's connect-0365.ps1. And what I load, because it's what I work on most, is Azure Active Directory and Exchange. So if you are a Link and Exchange person, maybe you're going to load Link and Exchange, because I don't really do very much with Azure Active Directory or SharePoint. So figure out what works for you, take the information, make yourself a quick connect script, and then save yourself some time going forward. All right, so as we get into some of the PowerShell examples, what I'm going to try to provide you is a little bit of a context for a company. So this is Contoso's journey to the cloud. And what we've got is I've got on-premises technology. So I've got a bunch of Outlook users and Exchange that are connected to Exchange. I've got Active Directory on-premises. And then I've just signed up for an Office 365 tenant. And I use this example because it's probably the most prevalent out of what we see. There are certainly people who come with workloads for SharePoint and Link on premises as well, but almost everybody starts with some form of Exchange on premises, and it really is that gateway drug to Office 365. So what we're going to do is we're going to run up DirSync, and we're going to synchronize our users out to the cloud. And what Contoso wants to do first is they don't actually want to move mailboxes first. They want to deploy Office Pro Plus, because you know what, they're coming from an old installation of Office and they want their users to get the best benefit out of the new Office. So after that, we're going to see them, they're going to move to Exchange, and then we're going to deploy SharePoint and Skype for Business to the cloud. All right, so who wants to see how to manipulate user licenses using SharePoint because they're sick of having to click a bunch of checkboxes in the Exchange administration console? Nobody? 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 There's a lot of hands up. Okay, good. What's that? Yeah. All right, so let's jump on over and let's talk about license manipulation. So first thing I want to do is actually show us what licensing looks like in the Exchange Administrative Console, because that really is going to be our gateway into how we're going to manage it in the shell. So if I go to billing, it's just a demo tenant that I have run up. And what I can see is that I've got Office 365 E3 licenses. I've got 25 of them that I can use for my users. I think subscriptions just shows me another view into that. And then for each of my users, I could pull up an individual user and look in and see, okay, when I look at my licenses, what do I have available? All right, I've got the ability to license a user all up for every single service, which is generally what we see and what most people do. However, sometimes I want to be able to manage and not light up individual services for users just yet, because I don't want them running off into Skype for Business, because we really haven't built up support structure for that yet. We really are just wanting to push out Office 365 Pro Plus and or Exchange and or SharePoint. So I want to be able to do a phased rollout of services to my users. So obviously this is the interface we can use from the Exchange Administration Center, but how do we get at this with PowerShell? So one of the concepts I want to talk about is building in. So first I need to be able to figure out what are the moving pieces, right? Well, I've got these licenses, and I've got users, and I know that I tie them together in some way. So let me actually just first go in and see, all right, I want to do get MSOL account SKU, because I read on Bing that has something to do with what I need to do. And I see, oh wait, I've loaded the module, but I need to connect to my service. Red is good. Don't clear it away, because now I wouldn't know what happened. So I want to do connect-msol service, and then it's going to prompt me for my password. And that's going to connect right on up. So now I'm connected to my service. So I don't want to have to retype that, so I'm just going to do up, get account SKU. And I see the same thing I got in my console, but now I get it in a way that I can actually use it, because we see the account SKU ID shows me my tenant name, the name of my SKU pack. And so what I can do is I can actually take that specific piece of information and assign it to a user. So what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll say set-msol user license. Oh, cool, that sounds like what I want to do, but I have no idea how to use it. One of the things that you can do is just hit enter, and it'll tell you what's required with any PowerShell. But a lot of times you want things that aren't required, they're optional, and this won't say, do you wish to enter any other parameters? It'll just run with the basis of what's required. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control-C out of that, and then I'm going to run to a new line, and I'm going to do a help set MSOL user license. And what I see here is I can find the parameters, and I say, oh yeah, what I want to do is be able to say which user I want to manipulate, and then tell them add licenses. Okay, cool. So I'm going to click CLS, because I've got a big font on here, get MSOL account SKU, and I'm going to do a set-MSOL user license, user principal name, and I don't know if you saw, because I did that pretty quickly, I don't type user principal name. I type U, I hit tab, I'm on, I know it's the correct parameter, I've saved myself a significant amount of time. And then I'm going to do user 9 at ps40365ignite.onmicrosoft.com, and I want to add licenses, and I want to just use what I see, ps40365ignite enterprise pack. Okay, and I get this error. Unable to assign license because it's invalid. I couldn't remember if I had licensed that specific user before. What I find is that you'll get this error. Not all errors are great, but all errors are potentially helpful, so you don't clear them out. And what this actually means is I've already licensed this user with this one, so I needed to reset them. But what we'll see, if I go in here and pull up user 9, actually user 1's not licensed. Let me try user 1. So I'm going to go up here, go back, so 3 back, change the one thing I need to change, and rerun. And we see I didn't get the error there. That error got me at the beginning because I'd see it's invalid. I'm like, no, it's not. It just worked for another user. And what I find is that it's an error that really means, hey, that user's already licensed. So not all errors mean bad things. It just means that, hey, what you expected to happen wasn't able to be appropriately accomplished. So let me go back on user 1, pull up user 1 again, and what we'll see is now that user's licensed. One of the things that I didn't do in PowerShell before that you have to do for users when you're originally licensing them is set that default location, that user location that's up top. So let's take this, and I got an individual operation. Let's make it a script. And so what I'll do is I'm actually going to go ahead and unlicense that user because I'm about to change them. And what I've got is a script called addlicense.ps1. And that is very small, so let me change that font and jump it up to there. Maybe down just a little bit. Okay, so what I've got, get a credential, connect to the MSOL service, because sometimes I just want to jump straight into this. I haven't been doing Office 365 administration, but guess what? Even if I have and I'm already connected, there's really no harm in doing that. And in here, I create a variable O365SKU, and I've named that the account SKU that we just discovered, right? And if I've got different SKUs, the different ones will show up separately, so you can set them for different SKUs. Maybe you've got some kiosk users versus some all-up E3 users. And then here, I'm getting my users using import CSV, and I've got a file called needlicense.csv. I'm taking each of those users, and then I'm performing the operation to set MSOL user usage location, set MSOL license, and then write something out to the screen, completed for blah, blah, blah. One of the cool things I'm doing in here is a try-catch. If you're scripting and you want to be able to catch failures and say, it's okay if this fails, but I don't want the rest of the script to die because one thing failed, wrap what you're attempting to do in a try-catch, and if there is a failure, the catch will be executed instead of, as a result of that, and the script won't all up bomb. So really nice way to be able to continue on as you go. So let's go ahead and run this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear a screen. So I'm going to assign license.ps1. I see it's going to prompt me for credentials. We're already connected, but it's no harm in connecting again. All right. And we see bop, bop, bop. Oh, I didn't clean this one up. I can tell you what that error is in a second. So I see completed for user 123, which were the 3 users that were in my CSV for my import. And then there was, I took this script from something else, and because there's an old saying that there's only one person who's ever uniquely authored a script in the world, and every other script has been borrowed in some way from that user or somebody else after them. And there's a remove PS session at the end, so that's what that error is about. So don't worry about that error. Our operation's actually completed successfully, and we know this because, 1, I can go check those 3 users and they're licensed all up. 2, I have my completed for on the screen. I'm a big fan of on-screen logging, even in the most simple of terms. And I'm going to show you some, not advanced, but some more advanced stuff that I do later on. But it helps you know where you are and what's been done, and if anything has failed up to now, especially if maybe I typed the wrong password and it's going to fail, 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 fail. Well, I can tell I shouldn't fail on all of those, right? So I can know that something's going on. Am I going to show how to assign only Exchange or only Office? You're going to get my first shirt because I can't pay you because Microsoft prevents me from doing that, but you gave me a great segue. So I want to assign just individual service workloads because that's a very, very common request. And I'll tell you, until you see it, it seems like, oh my goodness, it's a unicorn. I know it exists somewhere. I've never seen one, but I can tell you it exists. Once you see it, I talk to myself and I go, really? It took me that long to figure that out? So let's look at it. What's that? It can. So it's an individual operation. So what I'll do is, and I'll come back to this file prompt later. So let's think about something that I actually had at one of my customers recently. I want to enable E3 all up, but this individual segment of my customer population is running Link on premises, so I don't want to license them for Skype for Business yet. So what we do is we come up here. I have my SKU, so I've still got my all-up pack because I'm adding a license pack to a user, which is all the licenses and all the service plans that are included in that pack. But then I actually have to build one other object. And what I do is new MSOL license options. I give it an account SKU, and then there's a disabled plans parameter that you feed into it. And what I like to think about the license options is basically a license filter. So I want to filter and only have certain service plans that are going to be assigned to these users. So you can see I've got my whole enterprise pack, disabled plans, MCO standard, and I can show you how to dive in and get into that when we get into some PowerShell. But then I take same kind of thing we were doing before, for each user, import, blah, blah, blah. And I set MSOL user usage location. Gentleman was asking about, hey, does that include setting that? So it does. It's a separate commandlet, right? So that script, if I want to perform individual operations, just separate commandlets in there, and I could take that and modify. And then when I do set-MSOL user license, I come over here, add licenses, O365 SKU. That was the exact same as the script before. License options is the variable that I just built, which has the filter that says, don't license Skype for Business. So what I'm going to do is, I think that I've got this set for a separate set of users. So need license S4B disabled. So let's just jump in there and let's just see. My SKU doesn't match? Oh, that's another one of my tenants. All right. I'm testing you guys. You're good. Nobody's been drinking yet this morning. That's a really good sign. All right, PS4, O365 Ignite, Enterprise Pack. Cool, cool, cool. Loading in a separate file, which we just saw. I opened up quickly, has users 456. We did 123 originally. All right, everybody feeling good about this one? Always. There's a good joke about that one. All right, let's come in here. And let's do assign license S4B disabled. It's going to prompt me. Right. On Microsoft.com. Super secret password. 456. Oh, I got some errors. Unable to sign because it's invalid. I think I cleared out 4, but not 5 and 6. I didn't reset them all. But what we'll see is when we go into user 4, I have licensed all up, but Skype for Business is disabled. So just that filter, adding the license, taking away the one service. This is my, I feel awkward because I can't drop the mic and walk away moment because I've got a lapel mic. But this is the one that I feel like almost anybody can use. Take it forward, and this is the one that was going to challenge you in the future. If you haven't hit it yet, you're welcome for saving you a couple of minutes of time. A question? I'll take it. I'll take it. Thank you. This is the one I was really excited to share because it took me a little while to build into it. I got another trick for how to check for it that I'll show next.
How can you assign the license to your users if you have different kind of plans, like, for example, E3 and E1?
E3 and E, so the question was, how can you assign the licenses to your users if you have different kinds of plans? And one of the things you might remember that we ran early, I'm going to go ahead and clear this out so people can see it, is get MSOL account SKU. And what you'll see is I just have one SKU here. If you have different license plans, you're going to have different SKUs here that'll align. Enterprise Pack is E3. E1 is a different SKU. So we would take those two. What's that? Standard Pack, yeah. So they're named differently. I tell you what, I stopped thinking about what things are named, honestly. I just go in and grab it, because guess what? I got enough to remember, and if that displaces my anniversary or my wife's birthday, I'm in a lot more trouble, because I can't undo that. So, all right, I'm going to take some more questions in a bit, but I want to make sure to get through some more of the content, and we're running in towards 16, 15 minutes left. So let's see. I think I have it in the slide deck. So let's go back to the slide deck. All right, so I hope that helps. If that saves every single person in here from 30 to 40 minutes of time binging and having to put it together and testing, you're very welcome. Just think of me when you save that time and can go do some other things. So I put it in here for a reference for people who are building scripts later on. At the bottom, which is the one most people are really, really interested in, you build that options variable, take a plan, disable it, and then take your SKU, put that in there, pass that license options object, and then you can license individual services. So we're going into, holy cow, that looks really advanced. I'm going to step you through some of the logic, and then I want you to be able to use this if you have need for it in the future. This was a wonderful 2 hours of coding that I did from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. when I was up and my kid and my wife weren't, and I finally got this done, and I was really, really happy. What I had in my customer was they licensed E3 for most people, all up. But then they had a bunch of people that they said, oh, we just deployed Office 365 Pro Plus, and we weren't ready for Exchange, and when people log in, they're getting redirected to a weird place, and we want them to go just so they can download their software. So they unchecked the Exchange Online box manually for a bunch of users. Well, I need to be able to figure out before we migrate users if they were in that situation, and it was very, very just all over the place. Some users had this, some users didn't. There was really no pattern about it. So what I built, and I'll walk you through the code. At the first, write host, checking if O365 user is licensed for Exchange. This is some of my on-screen logging that I use. If time doesn't run out, I'll show you a pre-flight script that I've written for my customer that checks for a bunch of common situations that they've got. But if not, at some point, I will be posting that up on TechNet Scripts. So I want to give that out to people. I'm going to build a regular, just generic Exchange as well as a resource forest model, which is what my customer's in. So, write host, boom. License count variable is MSOL user, which was a variable I already created that was just get-MSOL user. So I got the full user object, took that, because I wanted to do other stuff with it. So that .license count, .licenses.count. Licenses is a parameter of MSOL user, and I wanted to get the number of them. So .count is a great function to see the number of something. I use this a lot when I import a CSV or something else, and I want to make sure that import ran well. I'll do my variable.count. I had 187 lines in my CSV. My count's 187. Cool, I'm good. 186 if I had a header, whatever. Then I do 2 for loops. Is anyone in here not familiar with a for loop? Be honest. Cool. At least one, so I want to make sure that we don't leave anybody out. A for loop is a structure of code, and you'll see there's brackets underneath the first 4 and at the end that says take a variable. In this case, we're taking j, which is an integer that's 0. And while j is less than the license count, run the code, and at the end of each iteration of the code, do this last thing, which is j++, which is just add 1 to j. So I'm going to run from 0 up until my number of licenses that are on my user. And this was because I needed to be able to tell if Exchange was disabled on any license, not just E3. I could do E3, that was really easy, but what if they had E1 and they were unlicensed, which is kind of a bad example because it's, I don't think there's anything else on that one, but whatever, you can get the concept. I wanted to make this future-proof. So go inside there. Okay, license status. So what I did is I took MSOL user, .licenses, and when you see the bracket $J, I take J, at first it's going to be 0. The licenses parameter of a user are all of the different license packs that have been assigned to that user. So 0, 0-based, so the first one. So I take that, and now I've got the individual first license. But I want to see what's been turned on and what's been turned off. So any of the licenses .service status will show you, hey, here's the plan, here's whether it's enabled or disabled. When, and I say when you start mucking around in PowerShell with this, and you get a little array of service status, service status, service status, service status, and you say, wait, Wes is a liar. I don't have this. It's not showing me enabled, disabled. Remember, you need to do .service status on that object, and then you'll see that in contextual terms. So it's basically a translation. License status count is license status.count. How many services are on this individual license pack that's been assigned to this user? Because there may be a bunch, like it's an E3, or there may be one, like it's an Exchange only. Then I iterate, same for structure, but now what I'm doing is I'm iterating through the individual services on my current license plan. Is everybody kind of following me here? Kind of digging down deeper, taking the license, diving into an individual services. And then what I do is just a comparison. If the service name of the current service plan on the current service for the user is like Exchange S Enterprise, which is what they're always like, then I go into if the provisioning status is like disabled, boom, Exchange is disabled true, and in my script I write to host fail because I want that on-screen logging. I took it out so that the text would kind of get bigger for you, but I also set a variable that I can then go and report on. And then I close out my if statement, my for, and my for. I want to take a moment and let you know that when you write this nesting, make sure you code comments in there that help you as well as other people who use it. When I have structures like this, when I close out my brackets, I almost always put a comment with what the original part of that bracket was so that I can know, and then I can always tag them back together. It helps anybody who's consuming your code. It also helps you because sometimes you have those crazy 5 a.m. coding sessions and then you come back at 5 p.m. and go, what the hell was I thinking and what did I do and what does that do? So you need to understand where you came from. All right, so I hope that helps. It's just an applied application or applied mechanism of this for you. In case it helps, awesome. Otherwise, maybe you learned a thing or three. All right. This is one, I didn't show this. Let me go back to this, because this is one that I have major passion for. So you noticed in my script, I imported a specifically named file name, right? And it was generic, needlicense.csv. Okay, when I'm in the midst of a 65,000 user migration like I am currently, how's that work when I need to go in and modify that every day? What if I forget to modify it because I'm doing 5 million things at once? Thankfully, it's just assigning a license, and most of those users get the same license, and I wouldn't have overwritten any work. But what if it was doing something that was stateful, making a change that depended on the input and the current user's current situation? I could really cause some harm on that. So I am actually not a huge fan of hard coding individual input file names into scripts. What I like is what's easy, which is file dialog boxes where I choose my individual inputs. So the code that I had on the screen, and I'll show that back, is something that we'll see here. Let me come here and reset licenses. So that we don't get a bunch of errors on the screen. This is just basically going to go through and is going to unlicense all the users in an input file. And you kind of just gave the cake away, but what you're going to see is assign license file prompt. So what I've got here is a separate script, and I've got at the top 2 functions. And the 2 functions are what's on the PowerPoint so that you can get that, because it actually does roll on the screen. So I see people taking some pictures. You may be missing out on a little bit of the line, but when the PowerPoint gets uploaded, you'll have the whole thing. So 2 functions that I'm then going to use. So we don't really care too much about the 2 functions because it's just reusable code at this point, and I don't want to walk you through since we're running down on time. Connect to the service, get the pack. Now, instead of file equals import CSV, specifically hard-coded file name, I'm using the 2 functions. So first I'm running actually the second one that's listed, which is get script directory, which is where's my current execution that I'm running from. And then I pass that in to get file name, which then returns a file that I select that I'll show you now. So when I run this, I'm going to get prompted to log in. I probably should have just cached my credential, but that's okay. We'll log in again. I'll worry about the error later. What you're going to see is now what you're going to get is a file pop-up box that allows me to go anywhere on my local machine or anywhere else that I have network access to, pick an input file every time. So I have to be a human and pick an input file for every specific operation that I want to perform. So this is one I love. Please reuse it because it keeps you safe. So, all right. Yeah. And I'm getting errors, but whatever. That was really just to show you that specific piece of functionality. Some of these Some of these scripts were put together decidedly last minute, as my good friend Tony Redmond tweeted about just before my session, as he said, Wes is in the speaker workroom having a fun time putting together his PowerPoint. All right, that's okay. We love Tony. All right. So, options for getting data from files. I want to just hit quickly on a couple of different things that you have at your disposal. Get-content versus import-CSV. Both are very useful. I'm a huge fan of import CSV, but there's a specific reason why, and it has to do with the data that I'm working with currently at my customer. Get-content is great because it just requires a plain text file with a list of objects that you want to do work against. I don't have to specially format, I just grab it and go. However, and then one of the other things is you can access each one individually. You don't have any specific references that you need to use. And I'll talk about that as I get down to import CSV. And I'll probably pull back up on my demo machine to show you what I'm talking about. The bad thing is it's only good for single column data. So if I've got an input file like most migration files are or most big files are, hey, here's all my objects and here's other information about them, then I can't use that because it needs just that individual thing. Import CSV, on the other hand, works great with multi-column data because when I get individual objects, I have to reference the column header that I want to use at that point in time. So it's great for that, but I've got to have column headers and I've got to be able to reference those column headers. So it adds a little bit of complexity, but it's certainly the more powerful of the two, and I definitely would encourage you more towards import CSV and less towards get-content. Get-content is a little bit of a fly-by-night to me because usually what that means is I'm creating files on the fly, in the moment. I'm really busy. I don't have time to do this other stuff, and we're humans, and when we rush, we make mistakes. So generally what I like to see is good data from the beginning, appropriately context, and then use import CSV. I'll come back to, actually, let me jump back over to my demo machine real quickly, and I'll kind of show you what I mean about referencing and column headers based on what we've already been working with. So my need license script, I've got name and user principal name. I'm actually not a big fan of verifying data in CSVs in Excel. One of the cool things that I like to do is right-click and edit, and it opens it up in Notepad. Now, if I'm editing a CSV, generally I'm going to go into Excel, especially if I'm reformatting, resorting, all of that. But if I just need to verify what's there, then I generally will go and right-click and edit because it shows me very quickly. I've got 2 column headers, name and user principal name, and then I've got 3 users. So when I reference this with import CSV, what you'll see is I couldn't just do user, right, which is my current object that I'm working through in the file. I have to do user.userPrincipleName to reference my current object and then which of the values on that current row. So it's a column-row combination, which is where it's more powerful, but you do have to require that structure as far as that goes. So hopefully that helps. All right, I got one more slide, and then I may show quickly a run through the script that I've built for my customer, but I want to talk about this. What if? It's not just for dreamers anymore. So if you've got a command that you want to measure the potential for success for, and you can't or don't want to do it at the time that you really need to run the command, like during a change window, during a migration, I want to be able to make sure that I'm ready to go, do a -what if on the command. It won't affect the change. It'll say, hey, take this commandlet and tell me if I actually ran it without this switch, what would happen? Would it work? Would it not work? Would it give an error? And the example that I use in my script is new-move request, which is an exchange commandlet. I want to do the mailbox move ahead of time, but don't actually move the mailbox. What that's going to do is it's going to reach out, connect to Office 365, have Office 365 validate that user's ready to be moved. If there's any errors that Office 365 was going to give me, guess what? I get them, but I get them hours before the migration window, so I'm not scrambling to fix the problems. I've got time to fix those problems. And it all comes down to the individual PowerShell that I would have run with simply a -what if at the end. One of the tricks, as soon as you run this, that you're going to want to know, how do you access that variable for the error, because I want to code it into a script? You'll see that I precede that with a $_ and then you can access that error variable that's returned with the variable simply called $error, which is one of those reserved variables that you can only use in this context. So majorly applicable. There's a specific instance of this, but think, hey, I want to be able to test if this would be successful later or not. Use the -what-if. And with that, I'm going to hit some questions here in just a second. Let me go ahead and I'll hit the pre-flight script eventually. I want to catch everybody who's still in the room. PowerShell.office.com is a new resource that's coming out. It's going to have a lot of example scripts, have a lot of, hey, here's what the PowerShell community is doing with Office 365. It's definitely a place and a resource you want to use in the future. And I'm going to hit 2 slides before, and then we'll hit questions since we actually just went right on time. Pre-release programs, SharePoint and Exchange, also called the TAPs. These are programs that help you help us help you. So you're helping us because you're running our technology as we're developing it and helping us verify that everything works as expected in a bunch of different situations. We're helping you because we ship higher quality products with great feature sets. You will not find a better access to the product group or more direct input into what our product should contain than becoming a member of a preview program or a TAP program. I was a member of the TAP for Exchange 2007 back in a previous professional life, and it was hugely impactful to me because I got to see where the technology was going before it was ever released. We got to have interaction with the product group to say, hey, you're missing out on this. This is a really great thing that you could do for us, really help us out. And then you get the whole free support thing. Free support from fine gentlemen like my friend down here in the front, Mr. Rob Whaley, is included in the preview programs because guess what? You are running earlier release code. There is an opportunity for things to go wrong. We don't want you to have any friction into getting those things fixed so that we can move forward and bring you those new features early. They're very interested in people signing up. We've got a booth down on the show floor. So I had to tout that for them a little bit. The booth is, if you see the white Office 365 huge column, they're right on one of the corners of the booth. And Rob will actually come up here if you're interested in TAP afterwards and talk to folks. So I know we're over time, so anybody who needs to leave, that's fine. I'll actually stay and take some questions. So if you're going to leave, please do so a little bit quietly so that the questions can be heard. If you have a question, please jump up to one of the microphones. That way we get it on the recording.
Do we have anything for...
Thank you, sir.
Hi. Do we have anything for OneDrive Business using PowerShell?
So OneDrive for Business PowerShell. I'll go ahead and tell you I'm not sure because that's really not an area where I specialize in. I'd be shocked if we didn't. But what I'd tell you is go around, hit PowerShell.office.com because certainly as that evolves, you're going to see more about that. Do some searches on the interwebs, and I hope that when you get there, there is help from the things you learned today for how you can manipulate those specific objects.
The internet and get help we have tried, but we are not finding much help on the...
Yeah, gotcha. And get help really does come down to the individual programmer of the commandlet having coded in that instruction manual. So those are things that if you don't have a whole lot of data in, those will continually improve over time because they absolutely have to. So keep looking around, and again, I hope you got something out of this that you're able to use once you get that specific commandlet or specific set of commandlets. Great, thanks. Oh, I'm actually going to jump back and forth on the mic, so yes, sir.
Howdy. I'm interested in scripting EOP reports. And
You're interested in scripting what?
EOP reports,
Okay.
Exchange Online Protection reports, and I've had mixed results. There's a newer version, the WebKit installer, that also installs some Azure SDKs that I don't need. And then when I go to try and install the correct PowerShell, the Azure older Azure PowerShell, it complains that I've got a newer version already installed.
That's a good one. I haven't hit that one before.
And it seems like a fairly straightforward thing to do. I did notice at one point you changed from declaring your credentials and entering the PowerShell session and then after you had your module loaded, you just fired up Connect MSOL. I'm kind of, are those two separate things?
So the difference you saw there was actually I had Connect MSOL on the script. So it was running in the background, and it prompted me for the credential. So no, Connect-MSOL service is going to be the ability to connect. It's just whether or not it was in the script or I explicitly typed it.
And I've gotten authenticated and connected, and then I go to run my commands or my script, and the commands are not present. So clearly I don't have the correct
Interesting.
module.
You probably don't have the right module. What I would do is there's a Yammer group associated with this. Go out and ask because, again, we all learn from each other. And anybody who is present on this that may know would be able to hit that, and I will do my best to keep an eye out for it, do some research on it, and get back to you. The other thing is go ask on the show floor.
I appreciate that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Is that worth
Enjoy the
t-shirt,
show.
sir?
Yes, sir.
You talked about the role-based access, especially in Exchange, how you all the way down to the specific parameters. When will I be able to do that in SharePoint Online?
It's a great question that I don't know the answer to. However, what I will tell you to do, just because I manage mostly Exchange Online and Exchange on-premises and then Azure Active Directory, what I'll tell you is go down to the show floor, go to the Office 365 space. We have people dedicated to SharePoint and SharePoint Online there, and I would go and talk to them about it, not only because the fact that they may know, but a lot of them are with the product group, and you could say, hey, this is something that's direly missing, if it is missing indeed, and then they hear it, hey, I talked to a customer, we really got to get to work on this.
I probably
For anything.
Rephrase it. When will I be able to do that with all the components?
What's that? What, all the components? Yeah.
Not just SharePoint.
And it's one of those
Jammer,
things.
OneDrive, so forth.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where each individual team's got to code that in, and we're trying to get better about being uniform across all the different teams. But yeah.